Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another interview. The first thing I want to ask you, Max, because while we are reunited at Spacestation, they've put us in different departments. You're in the coaching department. I'm in the co-streaming department. So is this us breaking up?
I certainly hope so. If I could get a little bit less contact with you at any given moment, I feel like that would be good for both of us.
Well, I did want to talk to you a little bit about the content creation because obviously you ended last year as a co-streamer and then you came back to coaching in the off-season with SSG. Was that always the plan? Were there any plans, any worlds where you stayed as a content creator, or were you always keen to return to coaching?
No, I didn't really have any plans of quitting content creation, to be honest. Like, content creation was going fine by the end of the year. Felt like it was a pretty progressive climb from starting it to where we finished in Stockholm, where, viewership was good on the stream, had a few different things going on where, I was making some educational content, selling private coaching. I was co-streaming with you, was making some YouTube videos. Add all of those things together and you've got enough to pay your rent, basically. So it was going totally fine, but I managed to scab a trip to Stockholm off Nightmare at the end of last year. And while I was there, Cjay comes up to me and he says, "Hey, Unter, I want you to coach me next year. Can you come back coach? And I want you to coach me next year." And I'm like, "Okay, sure." I like Cjay. I got some history with Cjay.
He's pretty good.
So I thought, I'll get back into the mix. Why not? Like, I'll put out the feelers, and if something comes up, I'll do it. And then naturally, Cjay proceeded to go join Team Liquid with Casaurus and Danny. So he was just taking the piss. He come back and coach him to then go and join the team with some other coaches. But Lenny came to me and offered me, to be the coach for the team that he was putting together. So it all sort of just happened. And for me, like, the choice between content creation and competitive, I've done competitive for 4 years prior to the half a year of doing content creation. I prefer competitive for sure. I don't mind content creation. Streaming is fun. Co-streaming is fun to watch the matches and whatnot. But I'm pretty competitively driven, Even if there's a lot of stress that comes along with competition, I feel like that's fun and that's something to do. Give you something to do when you get out of bed in the morning. Feel like you're competing towards, other than staring at the view count and hoping to God that it goes up.
Please go up, numbers. Please go up.
Yeah,
My rent is due soon. Then the team, how quickly did the team come together then once you sort of secured those pieces? You said like you sort of had Sugarfree almost kind of in from the start. What order did everyone sort of fall into place?
So I'd say that Sugarfree and Seeker were like instantly a lock because those two wanted to play together. From there, it was sort of just like, who can we attract towards the team that wants to come? For a while there, it was like, RuPaul wants to keep playing with Sugarfree. So like, RuPaul, he was kind of like playing both sides. Maybe he's going to join this team. Maybe he's going to join the Team Liquid team. But Liquid secured the Liquid org, which meant that there was a lot of money over there. And Liquid secured the Brains Trust, the guy with the draft documents, Danny. And I think that was a big draw for young RuPaul. So I think, just having that coaching staff, which is, like pretty much, BIS for bands, having two people where, one guy can focus on the coaching and one guy can focus on the extremely high quality drafting documents that everybody should learn to fear throughout the year. But then also the fact that the organization that they'd, got into their hand was essentially just going to be the highest paying by a pretty significant margin. Like, that was enough to sway young RuPaul. So then, after RuPaul had joined Team Liquid, it was like, okay, the next option, we're going to go with Cjay. We like Cjay. Cjay was playing with Seeker on Nightmare. This is who we'll roll with. And at the same time, there were other people in consideration for all the other roles. We're looking at, I want to say like 5 different tanks. Like, there were so many different tank players to consider. But at the end of the day, it was like, there's all these different options. Lots of Korean players don't speak English. Lots of Korean players, it's going to be really awkward if they have to play on ping for any period of time because they don't want to do it, or, they're not experienced doing it. So at the end of the day, like, everyone was after Kellan. We made a good offer to Kellan. Kellan decided he wanted to sign up. And that felt like a good call, considering the fact that everybody wanted Kellan. Kellan can speak English. Kellan's got experience playing on ping. And Kellan is actually flexible, which is, more than some of the other tanks. Some tanks, they're a little bit too one-tricky. And it's like, if you're going to get a Korean player just so that they can play Winston, then you need someone on top of that as well. Yeah. And I guess I have to talk about main support as well, right? We got Blissy. We wanted another Korean player. Like, if we're going to have Kellan, we probably want to have 2. And we felt that Bliss was probably going to be like the highest skilled main support that we could find on the market at the time. Because North America, like the main support market is pretty dry, sort of just like Vega and then everyone else. So the main support market being what it is, we felt like looking over Korean made sense because there's really like, there is sort of just like a tier break after Vega. So we went with Blissy pretty much straight away because he'd shown promise, like, you know, previously played Dallas Fuel, he'd played with Twisted Minds, he'd played Brig, he'd gone pretty far in the tournament. And like the biggest concern was like, you know, has he picked up Brig to the point that he's actually good at it? Because I thought he was like relatively proven on Lucio already, like spent a lot of time playing Lucio with the Dallas Fuel guys, a lot of time before that in contenders. So like already proven on Lucio. And once he'd proven it on Brig as well, like he'd played that with Twisted and like gone deep in the bracket, looked really solid. We thought, okay, this is it. This will work.
And then the obvious follow-up question to whenever you have Koreans imported into a team, into a North American team, is how much of a season is going to be spent playing on ping and playing remotely, and how much of it is going to be they're going to get a chance to come over and play from somewhere in North America?
I don't think we have like a super firm answer on like the exact dates and amount of time that they'll be spending in North America, but my understanding is that they'll be low ping for like every playoff bracket all the time. You know, it's like guaranteed that if they're playing a playoff bracket, which is when the matches actually matter, then they'll always be low ping for those matches, which is by far the most important thing. Having them on low ping for the games that actually qualify you for LAN is a lot more important than having them on low ping for a regular season game. And for example, they're not going to be on low ping for the matches that we have coming up this weekend. We're going to play against Nightmare and Liquid this weekend, and the Koreans will just be on high ping. And it's like, obviously that is disadvantageous to us, but at the same time, these matches, they do not matter as much as a playoffs game, right? This is seeding in a regular season. And I mean, if you can make top 6 out of 8 in the regular season, then you make it through to a double, you make it to a double elimination bracket. So like, really, you know, there might be like a bit of pride on the line with these games. Everybody wants to win all the time. You may struggle to believe this, but you know, pro gamers are a little bit competitive. But at the end of the day, these matches are not as consequential. The seeding matters for playoffs, being able to ban first and such. That's always going to be an advantage. But you know, having people on low ping, it's impractical to have them there for the whole year if they're not going to live in the country for the whole year.
I wanted to ask about, you've also got Scissors and Hawk on the roster as kind of listed as substitute players. What sort of role are they going to play in this year?
Well, with Lenny, he was away until like literally just now. Like today, it's the 29th of January for me right now. And Lenny got back from a holiday yesterday. So like we've had 3 blocks of scrims with Lenny so far, I want to say. Is that correct? That feels correct. Maybe 4. Yeah, we've had 4 blocks. He came to the first one too. He was just so bad that I forgot about him. But yeah, we have had like very, very few scrims with Lenny so far because he literally just got back just now. So up until that point, Scissors was playing every scrim all the time in Lenny's place. And like these guys are both, Lenny and Hawk, I mean, Scissors and Hawk, they're both just on the roster as like unpaid substitutes. You know, they're not contracted to Spacestation. They're just happy to sit on the bench. And then there's an understanding that like if we would like to play these guys and like incorporate them into our strategy more seriously, they would be open to doing that. But I think it's very unfair to do that without paying them and making them a part of the team in a more official capacity. So right now, I think they're more so just considered emergency subs than anything else. Like Scissors, he already did multiple weeks, like 2 weeks of emergency subbing because Lenny was just in the wrong country to be playing scrims with us. But overall, those guys, like you can see them on the roster, but really it's just because they couldn't get onto a team that they wanted to get onto, or like, you know, Hawk was going to be on our team before, but there wasn't like big roster size and budget available for it. So instead, these guys are sort of just like sitting it out on our bench.
How has the off-season gone so far then? About when did you really start scrimming, and what's the sort of initial impression now you've got everyone together?
I'd say like, well, we've been scrimming for what, 2 weeks? Yeah, we've been scrimming for like a week and a half, basically. So we've had 1 full week last week, and we had like 2 blocks the previous week. So we've been scrimming for about a week and a half. And like right when we started, we had to like get a little bit of a feel for each other, I'd say. I think it's a bit of a common experience like mixed rosters where people don't have like the greatest English or like the greatest understanding of how everyone sounds. that it can take a little bit of time for people to get a feel for what other people are saying and like what the regular call outs are and what people actually sound like. Even if you've got players that have like experience in the mixed roster setting, like Kellan and Bliss, they definitely like had to figure out like what everyone sounds like and what we're talking about like day to day, just so that everyone actually has a certain level of comprehension. So for the first couple of days, it was like pretty difficult, but then after a couple, it felt like, we just found a groove and went back to actually, not went back to, but actually started performing like a regular team. Yeah, went back to as a stretch when they were the first couple scrims. And then I feel like we've just got a consistent thing of like, there's continual grooves to find, as like now we're reincorporating Lenny into the lineup, and Lenny, he has to play a little bit of catch up now with some of the heroes that are being played, because it's like, he was away for like the majority of the Hazard release, and Hazard has been like so oppressive in the meta that there's like a lot to learn about that matchup in terms of how you want to approach it and how you play into Hazard, what you can and can't do. And, we have to approach that learning curve to some extent. But I mean, Lenny's like a really high quality player. He learns fast, and already, I mean, I'd say, it's been 2 days and it feels like he's pretty much adjusted. So it's quick, very brief learning pains or growing pains.
I wanted to ask you as well about some of the format and structure changes we're going to see this year, because there's been quite a few significant ones. Maybe one of the ones that we've touched on already is that now, instead of a circuit point system, we're going over to direct qualification for the LAN events. Do you prefer this version of qualification?
For sure. I think the idea of direct qualification is just like significantly better on a per tournament basis. I think like, even though NRG wound up actually like going far or like further, in NA than someone like Nightmare did last year, I think it's just not fair that, NRG came like 6th in the final tournament and then they snuck it through past TSM. I think direct qualification is just significantly more fair. I think rewarding a team for the body of their circuit points throughout the year, when rosters can get chopped and changed and the circuit points follow the players, not the teams and stuff like that, that's pretty unfair and just a pretty unsatisfactory system overall. I think it's much better for like both competitors and for viewers, where it's like you get to the end of the tournament and the teams that made it to the end are the ones that go to the LAN. That feels more fair overall. My only criticism, complaint, tear down my cheek, is the fact that, they like reduce the number of North America slots. So it's just like more of a dogfight to get into any of the LANs. But, they've done that to Europe as well. They've done that across the board. Now we're in line with Korea, which is probably more fair than anything else, to be honest, right?
Seems a little bit hard to argue the other end of that stick at the moment, at least.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things that comes with this as well is last season we experienced multiple times mid-tournament there'd be some kind of patch that would maybe shift the meta a little bit or sometimes shift the meta a lot. Obviously, this is likely to happen again this year with the patches just following that of the live game. How worried are you about these mid-tournament patches? Now there's direct qualification, you could be in a situation where you get your top 6, everything's great, you're strong in the meta, then a patch happens 2 days or half a week before the regional playoffs, and there's this huge shift right before the most important games of the stage.
I'd say that I'm not super worried about it, just because it's one of those things that affects every team equally. Obviously it will affect the teams that benefit from the patch more, and the teams that suffer from the patch, they'll suffer. But a last minute patch change, it influences everyone in the same, it's an equal playing field. So everyone has to adapt quick, and that's just the way that it is. It'll reward teams that are more flexible across the board, that haven't like leaned into one tricking super heavily. Because, right now, for example, like Hazard is so strong and so meta defining that I'd say, the majority of teams, like all of their compositions are kind of just revolving around like what they can do with Hazard, how they can plug and play Hazard into every different situation, because the hero is so strong. And I'd have to imagine that at some point there's going to be some sort of a balance change, which is going to upset that. And then that'll probably change how like a lot of North American teams feel. Because right now, North American team's strength is kind of defined by like how well they can play the Hazard, unless they're like one or two exceptions perhaps to that. But overall, Hazard is so incredibly important. Eventually there's going to be a balance change that upsets that. But that's even for everyone, right? Everyone has been practicing that stuff. And then everyone's going to have to pivot to something new.
One other thing that's going to promote a lot of flexibility throughout the year is, of course, the introduction of hero bans. How do you feel about, obviously you did a little bit of hero bans at the Esports World Cup with Makers, but how do you feel about this coming in for all of the OWCS season?
I was really positive about it at the end of last year. I remember thinking about like how AWC played and watching those matches just from like the observer/analyst standpoint, I thought this looks really, really good. You know, you can actually, there's room for some sort of like, you know, coach carry, draft docs Danny it mentioned basically. But yeah, the coach can have like a pretty significant impact in the game in terms of looking at the strengths of the enemy team and your own team and the weaknesses of both of those things, and then actually drafting around that. And I think it's a pretty good system. The thing where I was a little bit uncertain about it is the way that they changed the ruling from the way that they did in EWC, where the order is now you do your roster substitutions and then you do your bans. Whereas last year at EWC, it was the other way around, where you would first do your bans and then you would do your roster substitutions. So if you had a larger roster, you would be rewarded for that because you could play people if they got banned out. So you had two flex DPS and a hit scan on the roster. They banned hit scan, you would sub your flex DPS players in and you could play it that way. Whereas this time around, this year, you need to show what is in the server before the bans come out. And I don't think that that's a problem, really. I think that it makes things more fair, if anything, because it just, you know, discourages people from having large rosters and makes it more fair that you can actually target ban who is in the server rather than, you know, trying to target ban someone and then having them taken out. So I think it's a pretty good change, and it makes the production better too. It's awkward for players that are less flexible for sure because you can't sub them in and out. It's a little bit of the death of a specialist in a way. I think that it definitely makes it more difficult to be a specialist player going forward, but it just seems more fair overall and it makes the production smoother.
Yeah, I think there's still like situations where you can get away with these specialist players when it's sort of you get to pick the map and you get to ban first. You can sort of like have a pre-planned thing to get everything in place, but so there's still like a bit of a place. But I guess for a lot of teams as well, I think in general we're seeing smaller rosters for the most part this year anyway. So I think most rosters, I mean, even though yours is technically a 7-person roster, in reality it's probably going to be functioning more as a 5-person roster for the most part anyway.
Yeah, like having 2 emergency subs that we don't play, that don't come to scrims. You know, we have a 5-man roster for all intents and purposes right now. I think like you'll find that it's the teams that aren't getting paid that have the larger rosters more frequently. Actually, like when we're scrimming these other teams, they're actually making like more roster substitutions. You know, alternating between having a hit scan and 2 flex DPS, having 2 different tanks that are kind of alternating stuff like that. But on the paid teams, it's like, you know, Liquid and us, like, both teams are constrained by a budget, so only so many people are getting paid.
Do you feel it puts you almost at a disadvantage in a weird way? Even though obviously you have lots of advantages as well in terms of the resources, the ability to import and stuff like this. But when you look at a lot of those other teams that might be challenging you for that top 2 spot, there are a lot of teams like who have like a Kuffer and Clear type lineup is maybe the obvious go-to, right, to a degree, in terms of they have just more people to fill more roles. And in some ways end up almost with more flexibility than the partner teams.
I think at the end of the day, like if we really wanted to utilize the flexibility of our 2 unpaid players, we could. So I think it's like really unfair for me to say that it's a disadvantage for us. Like even if we're, you know, trying to be like reasonable and not play those people because they're not getting paid for it, like I think it's ridiculous for me to claim that it's a disadvantage that we're not doing that, because they're like, it's a self-imposed training weight, you know, like we're shackling ourselves to the fact that we're playing 5 people instead of 7. And there's obviously like there's objective advantages to playing 5 instead of 7 too, because, you know, if you have flexible players, like it's less difficult to target your bans around that.
I want to ask as well, because they've changed the map pool as well, in terms of, one, we've got a smaller map pool overall, but they've also changed the groupings a little bit. So Hybrid and Flashpoint are now grouped up. So we've now only got 4 groups of modes as opposed to 5 last year, which means whoever gets to pick map 5 gets to pick from all the modes except for the maps that have been played. Do you feel this is a better change?
I'm not sure that I really like it, to be honest. I kind of preferred it the way that it was, where there were a bunch of distinct modes and there was 5 of them, to be honest. I really don't like the way that you play 4 and then you loop back around to like a really open pool at the end, just because I think that it kind of favors the team that gets to pick map 5 a lot, just because they get really the pick of the litter when it comes to map selection. It gives a really big advantage to the map 5 pickers if you go 2-2 in a series. And then the other thing is just that I'm not sure if this is like an objective complaint or just something that doesn't really feel good, but I don't really like the way that Flashpoint is just balled in with Hybrid as well. I feel like it's maybe the reason for it is to try and keep modes like stylistically diverse, because Flashpoint is historically a mode where people would play like Lucia comps probably 95% of the time, something like that. Whereas for hybrids, you usually saw more diversity between like dive and that. But I think that there's enough diversity in the hybrid pool that they could have just made a distinct hybrid pool and then done the flashpoints, done the pushes, had 5 modes, just ignored the existence of Clash or combined Clash in with push as they did. But then they actually removed Clash recently, and I really don't know why, to be honest. Because like people talk about Clash, but it's like it's just not a game type. Like
as a spectator, I think especially like the Clash feels really fine. Like in like an organized environment, it just feels like another version of a control point based game. You just move around a little bit. But it certainly feels at least like last year the groupings felt a lot more like cohesive, I guess is the word, in terms of the similar comps would be viable on the maps that have been grouped together. So it didn't feel like there's this weird thing where Blizzard World and Blizzard World and Suravasa are in the same pool, essentially. So you can block one by picking the other, even though these are very distinctly different maps, which maybe just feels a little bit odd. But I think it's I know, I find it quite hard to like picture exactly how it will transpire in a draft if it really gives an advantage to any certain type of team or teams that are good at certain comps. Kind of to see it in practice first.
Yeah.
I have to ask, of course, because we're coming up to the opening weekend. We're 2 days out, and you've been given
news to me.
Lock in, mate. You got a couple of days to get it all together, and not only have you only got a couple of days, you've been given, I guess, for the worst possible set of opening fixtures. Maybe especially bearing in mind that you're a team that have not had Sugarfree available for a lot of your preseason as well. So you come in, Korean's not off ping, Sugarfree only recently rejoining and getting blended into the team, and your opening fixtures are Nightmare and Team Liquid, who are very much believed to be your closest competitors for those top 2 spots. So what should we expect from this opening weekend?
I mean, I wouldn't say that you should expect us to roll in and lose, because that would be ridiculous. That would be a bit of a pathetic mindset for me to have. But I do think it's reasonable to say that this is a team that like you're going to see progressive improvement throughout the year, and you're even going to see improvement between like online group stages and playoffs brackets. Like the fact that we have 2 Koreans currently playing on 170 ping, and then we are eventually going to have those 2 Koreans playing on a playable ping is going to be a tremendous difference to the outcome of maps and the outcome of fights. So I think that, you can expect us to have a competitive showing on the weekend. And, I mean, I'm not expecting to roll into this weekend's matches and lose. But, irrespective of the weekend's result, I feel like, you need to understand that this is not the final form of the team. I think the fact that the team has practiced with Lenny for 2 days right now after him being on a month break, and we have 2 Koreans on high ping, these are just disadvantages that are eventually going to fade away. Eventually, we're going to have a team that's in top form and not on crippling ping, and that will make a huge difference. Like Hazard as a hero is something that is tremendously ping affected. Like everything that comes out of that hero is related to the ping. Your wall that requires you to you put a wall behind someone and boop them in and lock them in a corner, it spawns late because you're on ping, and then the enemy just gets away from it. The slash doesn't register because if they step while they're on their screen, it just no registers on your screen. It's like the equivalent of playing Doomfist on high ping. Like playing heroes like Lucio and Brig, you're constantly affected by Hazard's displacement. You're constantly bashing things that are moving away from you, which means that when you're on high ping, nothing registers. Like all of these things for the Koreans, like they're disadvantages in the online stage that just won't exist for the matches that actually matter and influence whether or not we attend LAN and make a buck.
In general as well, when people think of the North American region, I think a lot of people are picturing maybe a 3-horse race right now between yourselves, Team Liquid, and Nightmare. Do you think that's a fair characterization of a region, or how close are some of these other teams like the Timelesses or Rad to this sort of like the big 3?
Well, the thing is, we screamed Liquid right at the beginning, and I was pretty happy with our results versus Liquid, but we barely screamed Nightmare at all. Like we actually, because we had this match coming up, we had like a little period where we didn't really play against Nightmare, and then we had to cancel all of our upcoming scrims versus Nightmare because the match fixtures dropped, and it turns out that we actually just cannot scrim them because we're playing them this weekend. My understanding of Nightmare is that they're a strong team as well, and that that we are sort of the 3 teams that are the most competitive in the region. I think that like Timeless is again, it's hard for me to say like how strong these teams feel because we're not scrimming the two alleged strongest teams right now. You know, it's hard for me to tell you like how good is Liquid versus how good is Nightmare compared to us when we just don't play against them right now. Like we load into the season. Yeah, exactly. We load into the season and it's like Lenny doesn't even know who's on Nightmare. I'm gonna go out on the limb and say, you know, because like Lenny hadn't even seen it, right? So really, like, it's a work in progress for me to power rank that. I will say that, you know, I was impressed, surprised by Timeless. I think that Timeless is a solid roster as well. Definitely has like a shot at upset wins throughout the whole season because they've got, you know, Riker, who is a fairly flexible tank player. I think he, you know, has good flexibility across a bunch of different heroes. They've got like a very underrated backline as well. Like they've got Luke, Minnow, Squid, where this is like the equivalent of your North American Violet Finn, you know? Like when I'm not calling Vega Violet, you know? I'm not calling Vega Violet. That's Violet Finn, that's my Luke and Squid, you know? Because we've got Mr. Luke Minnow theory just playing all sorts of it's a fun roster. It's a fun roster. It's actually a talented roster. Squid's always doing something creative. It's an overall good team. And I mean, it's got Rocket Chopper. It's got like the Timeless TSM DPS line from last year that's been around forever and playing together forever. So I think it's a fairly skilled roster. But at the end of the day, a team like Liquid probably has higher highs and just like does what they do better because, you know, Rocket and Chopper, they're like a flexible DPS line, and Luke Squid, they're a flexible support line. But Vega RuPaul are just the same thing but better, and Tree Knife is basically just the same thing but better. So, and you know, again, Infected versus Riker, like in Infected probably has a similar situation to Riker, where he's like a flexible tank player that has a bit of the dive tank, bit of the ground tank going on. But again, Infected probably just has higher highs. So those teams are a little bit similar to one another, and they both try to lean into their variety. But you know, Timeless probably more of an outside shot.
And then first time on SSG, obviously filling in Chrissy's shoes from last season. Is there anything you want to say for the fans for what to expect from the team this year?
That's class. That's class, really. You know, I'm not much of a man to stand on the stage and, you know, have my heart go out to the fans, if you know what I mean. Like I
think I understand, yeah.
Yeah, I think you know what I mean. You know, usually I'm more about chatting shit about the enemy than saying to the fans, we're going to do great, guys. We're going to do it for you. Because, yeah, I don't know. To be honest, I kind of forget that the fans exist. Not to sound like too much of a dickhead. But, you know, like the whole point of the competition for me, you know, it's like I like to focus on the competition and win the games. I don't really focus too much on like what the folks on Twitter that are watching the matches are saying. Even the people in my Twitch chat, I've forgotten their names already. So, like, you know, it can happen.
Well, flip side of that then, have you got a message for Nightmare and Team Liquid ahead of your opening fixtures?
A message for Nightmare and Liquid? Jeez. I mean, as soon as Lenny figures out who's on Nightmare, they're going to be in big trouble. That's all I'm going to say.
As soon as somebody links in that tweet with the roster announcement, they're in trouble.
Yeah, no. As soon as he clocks who's on that team, there's going to be big trouble.
All right. Thank you very much, Unter. Appreciate your time. Good luck on the weekend.
Cheers.